You are listening to Leading the Factory Forward with your host, Lynn Friest. We share interviews with manufacturing experts and strategies for embracing the digital future, recruiting a new workforce, finding new business. Lynn is an advanced manufacturing strategist and leadership consultant who is on a mission to show manufacturing leaders how to improve their current operations while preparing for a digital future. And here's your host, Lynn Friest.
Hello and welcome to this episode of Leading the Factory Forward. This is episode number 93, and it's titled, How to Create Your Personal Learning Plan. My goal in this podcast is to help you create a compelling future for yourself, your teams, and your organizations. I encourage you to visit my website and download the summary at the bottom of the podcast episode and use that as a tool to capture notes as you explore the ideas in this episode. And on a special note, on June 9th, at 12:30 p.m. Central Time, I'll be offering a free webinar on 4 actions that will jumpstart your Encore career. And a link for registering for that webinar will be included in the show notes. So today, we're going to talk about how are you going to learn new skills as a leader or develop in your Encore career. And I'm going to quickly review 5 books that I've found useful as far as providing me with skills on how to learn. The first one is a book called Triggers by Marshall Goldsmith. Marshall Goldsmith is a world-renowned executive coach, and he really helps CEOs get better and really become exceptional. And in his book, he talks about several things, but the first one is the title, Triggers, talks about what are the things that we do, the habits that we have that we do every day, and how can we change that? Habits are powerful, so we really have to consciously do something different. And he suggests using some daily questions to, again, keep your mind refocused on these questions that are things that are important to you. Now, Marshall also talks about things like we need structures. And he has a great example of Alan Mulally, CEO of Ford Motors. He had what he called a business plan review as a highly structured meeting, and he had it every week with his top 12 executives. And each of the executives had to present in the same way, the same information, and he didn't allow any deviations. But that provided consistency. People knew what was going to be expected of them at these meetings. And again, he used that to great success in leading Ford. So again, this idea of triggers is what is the things that get us started, especially set off our behaviors that are habits, the things we hardly even think about, but may not serve us well. And this is one of the key things is to get you started learning some new skill, some new behavior, whatever it may be in your career as a leader or in your Encore career. Now, the second book I'd recommend is Atomic Habits by James Clear. And he really focuses on habits. He says, habits shape us. And literally, people throughout the ages have said, you are what you do each and every day. And what we do each and every day is often shaped by habits. I think one time I saw a survey that said about 47% of what we do every day is a habit, which means we're not even thinking about it when we do it. Some of that is great, whether it be brushing your teeth, pouring coffee, any number of things. But others, if we're going to adopt new skills and behaviors as leaders or in our new career, we have to be more intentional about that. Now, James Clear says there are basically 4 steps in any habit. There's a cue, or what triggers the habit. There's a craving. There's some reason we like or enjoy doing this. Then there's the response, the actual execution of the habit. And then at the end of that, we experience some kind of reward. Now, in terms of me and eating chocolate chip cookies, there's a cue. I get a little hungry. The thing that pops into my mind is chocolate chip cookies. I go ahead and have some, and my reward is kind of that sugar rush you get from the taste of the chocolate and the cookies. So again, that's a simple thing, but as we can look at those, we can choose intentionally maybe to adopt new habits with respect to how we work with people, maybe new habits with respect to creating a podcast, or maybe new habits with how we're going to manage our email. So any of these things are things that we can intentionally do differently than we do today. And so James Clear again says there's 4 steps to really helping you with that. The first is make it obvious. Whatever you want to do, have it in front of you. I remember a coaching client once that wanted to be more consistent running. Well, they literally set the running shoes on the toilet seat every night. So the first thing they saw in the morning going in the bathroom was the running shoes. 2, make it attractive. And something like that is say, hey, if I go ahead and eat 4 vegetables, then I'm going to, also get a drink of fruit juice or something like that. Try to do something that makes it attractive to you to do. Try not to make it a bad habit that makes it attractive, but then make it easy. Again, remove the obstacles. So if, like the example with the running shoes, if they're in the closet somewhere, you may not think of it. It's kind of like many of us leave our keys in the same place every day. So it's obvious and it's easy to just grab our keys, those kinds of things. And then make it satisfying. So if you're trying to develop a inbox zero, clear out your inbox every day. Sit back and reward yourself with a few minutes of gratitude if you finish cleaning out the inbox at the end of the day, or whatever it is you're trying to do. So those are the 4 steps he says with respect to creating a new habit. Make it obvious, make it attractive, make it easy, and make it satisfying. And incidentally, he also talks about it's actually kind of hard to get rid of old habits, I'll say, but what you can do is create a new habit that takes the place of that old habit. And over time, it just overlays it. It's not that you've really gotten away from it. You've just decided to adopt new habits that take the place of maybe these less effective habits that you might have. Now, the next book is Deep Work by Cal Newport. And Cal Newport is a professor. He's done a remarkable job with publishing both educational and professional papers, but he also has these books out. The one he's known for is Deep Work. He also has a more recent book out called The End of Email. His whole idea is this idea of focusing on your deep work, the really valuable time you spend. And as he points out, it's not only very valuable, but it's pretty rare. Most of us kind of multitask our way through life, or we jump from thing to thing, and we're, quite frankly, often distracted. And what he says is he's put together a process where he will have a sole focus on one activity for, between 25 minutes and 90 minutes, something like that. So he says you really have to do something where you're going to have singular focus, work deeply, as he says. One of his ideas is you have to embrace boredom. In other words, you have to be willing to not have a stimulus popping up for you. So you have to be able to sit there and say, I think one of the famous writers once said, I don't know what I'm going to write, but I'm going to sit down in my chair to write every morning. And I'm going to sit there, even if I never write a word, I'm going to sit in that chair every morning. And sooner or later, he was, generating the writing that he wanted to do. Another thing Cal does, and he's very emphatic about this, and quit social media because, going back to the Marshall Goldsmith, social media is just full of triggers. I mean, that's their whole purpose, is to distract you and move your attention to something else. And he says it's like we're all have attention deficit disorder or something like that. Social media just goes ping, 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 ping. He takes the extreme view. You just have to quit it. Now, what he sometimes has modified by saying is you have to set aside maybe a half an hour in the morning or a half an hour in the evening to review social media. Now, he doesn't actually do that. He literally does quit all the other platforms. And then what he has done is maybe added one back in when he thought it had a purpose. So if he wanted to connect with people around his book on LinkedIn, then he might start doing something. But he was very careful not to just end up scrolling through everything on LinkedIn. So he was very purposeful and intentional about social media. And then the other thing is to drain the shallows, as he says. And that's, getting rid of the busy work, the stuff that we can always say we're always busy, but are we really creating much? So it's those items that if you really don't have to do it, you really have to make a decision. And decisions basically means kill off other options. So again, I think the famous one Steve Jobs did when he returned to Apple is he killed off a whole raft of products. And he never really let new products come back in until he had a clear picture of how they fit into Apple's strategic plan. So you as an individual, all the stuff, all the busy work you may have done, and many of that gets to be habitual, but you have to go back and look at it again and say, is this really contributing? Or you have to time block it. Certainly many people in today's world will say, I'm going to spend 4 sessions of 30, 60, 90 minutes in the morning and get, those 4 sessions of work done. And then in the afternoon, I'll do administrative tasks. I'll do those things that aren't going to create a lot of value, but maybe have to be done. The fourth book I'll reference is one that's a couple years old now, and it's very tactical. And this is a book called The First 20 Hours by Josh Kaufman. And what Josh Kaufman did was he actually said, how can I create rapid skill acquisition? And we'll go through his 10 principles of rapid skill acquisition. But he said, I wanted to see if this would work in a variety of settings. So literally in his book, he shows how he went through and did a project on yoga, one on programming, one on touch typing, one on the strategy game Go, one learning to play the ukulele, and finally one on windsurfing. So he used these principles to try to learn what he wanted for his first level of work in each of those very different areas. And that's the idea that he said is the first 20 hours, you can really make progress, towards starting a skill in one of these areas. So his 10 principles of rapid skill acquisition are: first, choose a lovable project. Choose something that you're really interested in or have at least some passion for. Then you have to focus your energy on one skill at a time. In other words, so if you want to learn how to do podcasting, there are several different skills involved, and you have to pick out one. It could be, how do I create a podcast outline? Or in terms of social media, how do I pick the right social media platform to be on? So use your energy on only one skill at a time. Then you need to define your target performance level. Again, in these examples he used, he wasn't trying to be the expert or the all-time great person in these, but he wanted in programming, he wanted to be able to provide a simple program that was useful, but wasn't a big project. Touch typing, he wanted to get to 30 words a minute or some number like that. Again, not exceptional, but it would show he had some competence in that particular skill. Then you need to deconstruct the skill into sub-skills. So, for example, the ukulele, he had to say, well, I have to learn chords. I have to learn finger positioning. You have to really get it down and say, okay, how am I going to go about learning finger positioning? So you really get down to the small sub-skills. And then you have to obtain critical tools. So for each of these in the programming, you had to get some reference manuals for the programming language. He had to have it set up on his computer, those kinds of things. Then you need to eliminate the barriers to practice. And this is where we get back to some of the earlier stuff with habits and things like that. You have to make it, front and center that this morning I get up, my computer's ready to go, or my typewriter's there if I'm going to learn touch typing. So you just have to not say, I'm going to have to do 3 or 4 things before I can actually get started practicing. And then make a dedicated time to practice. Again, we can always do stuff sometime, which basically means no time. So we really have to say, hey, for this 25 minutes or this 60 minutes or 90 minutes, I am going to practice this particular skill. He also said you need to create fast feedback loops. So you need to know if you're doing it right, getting better. So that can either be people give you feedback, or maybe it could be you've tried to practice a scale 10 times and you know whether you've hit the notes right or wrong, but you're learning very quickly whether you're doing it. So it's not feedback 2 or 3 days later, it's feedback right away. Then he talks about how to practice. And again, I mentioned practice by the clock in short bursts. In other words, you're going to practice something for a given amount of time and you're going to do over and over again. His last thing is emphasize quantity and speed. Again, it's repetitions. You think of the sports skills or the skills like touch typing, that's a lot of muscle memory. So you need a lot of good quantity and you need to, have fairly quick repetitions of it. So you're sticking with it. Now, again, you have to remember, are you practicing? Or are you practicing just beyond your skill levels so that you're actually, trying to learn something new? So there's a fine line there, but he says, you got to just put the hours in to make some of this stuff happen. So now the final book is one that just came out and I'm currently reading. It's Effortless by Greg McKeown. And he actually had an earlier book called Essentialism. His earlier book was How Do You Choose Specifically What is the Most Important Work for You? But in Effortless, he goes beyond that and starts saying, okay, once I've chosen, then what? So he talks about some ideas on how do you help make work effortless once you've got your key work. Think about, what if this could be easy and fun? Often our important work we think of as work, when he suggests, hey, flip it around and say, hey, how could this be considered fun? How could I consider it to be easy? So in terms of podcasting, if I'm sitting here thinking, oh, I have to make a presentation to, 500 people versus if I'm thinking of this as a conversation with a friend, my mindset goes in a whole different way. So you have to do that. The next thing he says is you have to remember to let go of things. And this kind of goes back to the non-essential work, or some of the earlier authors said, you have to let go of stuff that isn't really high priority for the goals that you've set for yourself. Then his third thing that he recommends is you need to define what done looks like. And this kind of goes back to the first 20 hours with Josh Kaufman, but what is your target level of performance? What is it you're trying to get to? When people are doing writing or novels or creating presentations, is 99% perfect what they're shooting for? Or is it more like 90% or 85% or something like that? It's important that you just look at what does done look like so you're not chasing perfection forever. That last couple of percent can take years literally to get to. Another piece he says is you should start by whatever work you're trying to do to make it effortless. You need to simplify it. And sometimes that means starting with zero. So you may have a way of doing things like I have a process for creating a podcast, but he sometimes says you got to cut it back to zero and rebuild it. It's like the old zero-based budgeting. Start from scratch and say, what are really the essential pieces that need to go into this work I'm trying to do? And then finally, he says, do what you can to automate things because there's nothing easier than when you've automated it. And, that's an important piece too, that some of the work in today's world, whether it be through technology or you could even, have others help you with some of this work. So it's not really automated, but it's offloaded from you. So think about what are the things you can automate, especially with the technology we have available to today. So I've given you a whole bunch of stuff here with 5 different books. You can't tackle all these ideas at once. I would recommend starting with the Triggers book with Marshall Goldsmith. And he has the list in there of some daily questions he started with. He actually has a list now of approximately 20 questions. But he says these are the basic questions you might start with to measure your engagement in your life and work. So the first one is, did I do my best today to set clear goals? Second one is, did I do my best to make progress towards my goals today? Third was, did I do my best to find meaning today? The fourth one, did I do my best to be happy today? The fifth one, did I do my best to build positive relationships today? And the sixth one, did I do my best to be fully engaged today? Now, the process Marshall uses for this and suggests for others is you give these questions every day a score from 1 to 10. And then just put them in a spreadsheet. You can kind of get a figure as you go through filling out this spreadsheet, the ups and downs you have in the course of a week, and they're going to be there. So there maybe on some day you didn't feel happy at all. On other days you felt really fulfilled. So he just says by daily paying attention to these questions, it can truly make a difference for you. So finally, just to recap, we talked about these ideas in these 5 books. The book Triggers by Marshall Goldsmith, the book Atomic Habits by James Clear, and the book Deep Work by Cal Newport. Then the book The First 20 Hours by Josh Kaufman. And finally, the book Effortless by Greg McCowan. So I recommend these books. And again, we're going to have the show notes that you can see some of these things that I shared with the books, but I recommend you go to the books themselves for a more complete and rich discussion of them. So what's up next? We're going to continue a mix of solo episodes and interviews with experts. And again, some will be in manufacturing, but also others will be in leadership areas that can help you build yourself and your business. And I'm also going to continue sharing my ideas on the Silver Entrepreneur and starting an encore career. And I always encourage you to visit my website to download the summaries of the podcast, or you can also download the free worksheet, 3 steps you need for a more productive workday. Now, in sort of a special announcement, on June 9th at 12:30 p.m. Central Time, I'm going to be offering a free webinar on 4 actions that will jumpstart your encore career. And a link for that registration will be included in the show notes. So again, thanks for listening.